The crucifixion of Jesus occurred during the 1st century AD, most probably between the years 30 and 33. Jesus, whom Christians believed to be the Son of God as well as the Messiah, was arrested, tried, and sentenced by Pontius Pilate to be scourged, and finally crucified by the Romans. Jesus' crucifixion is described in the 4 canonical Gospels, referred to in the New Testament epistles, attested to by other ancient sources, and is established as a historical event confirmed by non-Christian sources. Although there is no consensus on the precise details of what exactly occurred, collectively referred to as the Passion, Jesus' suffering and redemptive death by crucifixion are the central aspects of Christian theology concerning the doctrines of salvation and atonement. Historicity. In modern scholarship, the baptism of Jesus and his crucifixion are considered to be 2 historically certain facts about Jesus. For example, James Dunn states that these 2 facts in the life of Jesus command almost universal assent, and rank so high on the almost impossible to doubt or deny scale of historical facts, that they are often the starting points for the study of the historical Jesus. Bart Ehrman states that the crucifixion of Jesus on the orders of Pontius Pilate is the most certain element about him. John Dominic Crossan states that the crucifixion of Jesus is as certain as any historical fact can be. Eddy and Boyd state that it is now firmly established that there is non-Christian confirmation of the crucifixion of Jesus. Craig Blomberg states that most scholars in the third quest for the historical Jesus consider the crucifixion indisputable. Christopher M. Tuckett states that, although the exact reasons for the death of Jesus are hard to determine, one of the indisputable facts about him is that he was crucified. While scholars agree on the historicity of the crucifixion, they differ on the reason and context for it, e.g., both E. P. Sanders and Paula Fredrickson support the historicity of the crucifixion, but contend that Jesus did not foretell his own crucifixion, and that his prediction of the crucifixion is of church creation. Geza Vermes also views the crucifixion as a historical event but provides his own explanation and background for it. John P. Meyer views the crucifixion of Jesus as historical fact and states that based on the criterion of embarrassment, Christians would not have invented the painful death of their leader. Meyer states that a number of other criteria, e.g., the criterion of multiple attestation and the criterion of coherence, help establish the crucifixion of Jesus as a historical event. Although almost all ancient sources relating to crucifixion are literary, the 1968 archaeological discovery just northeast of Jerusalem of the body of a crucified man dated to the 1st century provided good confirmatory evidence that crucifixions occurred during the Roman period roughly according to the manner in which the crucifixion of Jesus is described in the Gospels. The crucified man was identified as Yohanan ben Hakkel and probably died about 70 AD, around the time of the Jewish revolt against Rome. The analyses at the Hadassah Medical School estimated that he died in his late 20s. Another relevant archaeological find, which also dates to the 1st century AD, is an unidentified heel bone with a spike discovered in a Jerusalem gravesite, now held by the Israel Antiquities Authority and displayed in the Israel Museum. Gospel harmony. In the New Testament, all 4 Gospels conclude with an extended narrative of Jesus' arrest, trial, crucifixion, burial, and accounts of resurrection. In each Gospel, these 5 events in the life of Jesus are treated with more intense detail than any other portion of that Gospel's narrative. Scholars note that the reader receives an almost hour-by-hour account of what is happening. Christians have traditionally understood Jesus' death on the cross to be a knowing and willing sacrifice undertaken as an agent of God to atone for humanity's sin and make salvation possible. Most Christians proclaim this sacrifice through the bread and wine of the Eucharist, as a remembrance of the Last Supper, and many also commemorate the event on Good Friday each year. The earliest detailed accounts of the death of Jesus are contained in the 4 canonical Gospels. There are other, more implicit references in the New Testament epistles. In the Synoptic Gospels, Jesus predicts his death in 3 separate episodes. Combining statements in the canonical Gospels produces the following account. Jesus was arrested in Gethsemane following the Last Supper with the 12 apostles, and then stood trial before the Sanhedrin, Pontius Pilate, and Herod Antipas, before being handed over for crucifixion by the chief priests of the Jews. Jesus then had to make his way to the place of his crucifixion. Once at Golgotha, Jesus was offered wine mixed with gall to drink. Matthew's and Mark's Gospels record that he refused this. He was then crucified and hung between 2 convicted thieves. According to some translations from the original Greek, the thieves may have been bandits or Jewish rebels. According to Mark's Gospel, he endured a torment of crucifixion for some 6 hours from the 3rd hour, at approximately 9 a.m., until his death at the 9th hour, corresponding to about 3 p.m. The soldiers affixed a sign above his head stating, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews," in 3 languages, divided his garments and cast lots for his seamless robe. The Roman soldiers did not break Jesus' legs, as they did to the other 2 men crucified, as Jesus was dead already. Each Gospel has its own account of Jesus' last words, 7 statements altogether. In the Synoptic Gospels, various supernatural events accompany the crucifixion, including darkness, an earthquake, and the resurrection of saints. Following Jesus' death, his body was removed from the cross by Joseph of Arimathea and buried in a rock-hewn tomb, with Nicodemus assisting. According to all 4 Gospels, Jesus was brought to the place of a skull and crucified with 2 thieves, with the charge of claiming to be King of the Jews, and the soldiers divided his clothes before he bowed his head and died. Following his death, Joseph of Arimathea requested the body from Pilate, which Joseph then placed in a new garden tomb. The 3 Synoptic Gospels also describe Simon of Cyrene bearing the cross, the multitude mocking Jesus along with the thieves, robbers, rebels, darkness from the 6th to the 9th hour, and the temple veil being torn from top to bottom. The Synoptics also mention several witnesses, including a centurion, and several women who watched from a distance, 2 of whom were present during the burial. Luke is the only Gospel writer to omit the detail of sour wine mix that was offered to Jesus on a reed, while only Mark and John describe Joseph actually taking the body down off the cross. There are several details that are only found in one of the Gospel accounts. For instance, only Matthew's Gospel mentions an earthquake, resurrected saints who went to the city, and that Roman soldiers were assigned to guard the tomb, while Mark is the only one to state the actual time of the crucifixion and the centurion's report of Jesus' death. The Gospel of Luke's unique contributions to the narrative include Jesus' words to the women who were mourning, 1 criminal's rebuke of the other, the reaction of the multitudes who left, beating their breasts, and the women preparing spices and ointments before resting on the Sabbath. John is also the only one to refer to the request that the legs be broken and the soldiers' subsequent piercing of Jesus' side, as well as that Nicodemus assisted Joseph with burial. According to the first epistle to the Corinthians, Jesus was raised from the dead and, according to the canonical Gospels, appeared to his disciples on different occasions before ascending to heaven. The account given in Acts of the Apostles, which says Jesus remained with the apostles for 40 days, appears to differ from the account in the Gospel of Luke, which makes no clear distinction between the events of Easter Sunday and the Ascension. However, most biblical scholars agree that Luke also wrote the Acts of the Apostles as a follow-up volume to his Gospel account, and the 2 works must be considered as a whole. In Mark, Jesus is crucified along with 2 rebels, and the day goes dark for 3 hours. Jesus calls out to God, then gives a shout and dies. The curtain of the temple is torn in two. Matthew follows Mark, adding an earthquake and the resurrection of saints. Luke also follows Mark, though he describes the rebels as common criminals, one of whom defends Jesus, who in turn promises that he and the criminal will be together in paradise. Luke portrays Jesus as impassive in the face of his crucifixion. John includes several of the same elements as those found in Mark, though they are treated differently. Other accounts and references. An early non-Christian reference to the crucifixion of Jesus is likely to be Murabba Serapian's letter to his son, written sometime after AD 73 but before the 3rd century AD. The letter includes no Christian themes and the author is presumed to be a pagan. The letter refers to the retributions that followed the unjust treatment of 3 wise men, Socrates, Pythagoras, and the wise king of the Jews. Some scholars see little doubt that the reference to the execution of the King of the Jews is about the crucifixion of Jesus, while others place less value in the letter, given the possible ambiguity in the reference. In the Antiquities of the Jews, Jewish historian Josephus stated that Jesus was crucified by Pilate, writing that, "Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, had condemned him to the cross." Most modern scholars agree that while this Josephus passage includes some later interpolations, it originally consisted of an authentic nucleus with a reference to the execution of Jesus by Pilate. It is notable that Josephus and other historians did not live during Jesus' lifetime. James Dunn states that there is broad consensus among scholars regarding the nature of an authentic reference to the crucifixion of Jesus in the Testimonium. Early in the 2nd century, another reference to the crucifixion of Jesus was made by Tacitus, generally considered one of the greatest Roman historians. Writing in the Annals, Tacitus described the persecution of Christians by Nero and stated that Pilate ordered the execution of Jesus. Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus. Scholars generally consider the Tacitus reference to the execution of Jesus by Pilate to be genuine, and of historical value as an independent Roman source. Eddy and Boyd state that it is now firmly established that Tacitus provides a non-Christian confirmation of the crucifixion of Jesus. Another possible reference to the crucifixion is found in the Babylonian Talmud. On the eve of the Passover, Yeshua was hanged. For 40 days before the execution took place, a herald went forth and cried, "He is going forth to be stoned because he has practiced sorcery and enticed Israel to apostasy. Anyone who can say anything in his favor, let him come forward and plead on his behalf." But since nothing was brought forward in his favor, he was hanged on the eve of the Passover. Sanhedrin 43a, Babylonian Talmud. Although the question of the equivalence of the identities of Yeshua and Jesus has at times been debated, many historians agree that the above 2nd century passage is likely to be about Jesus. Peter Schaeffer stating that there can be no doubt that this narrative of the execution in the Talmud refers to Jesus of Nazareth. Robert Van Vorst states that the Sanhedrin 43a reference to Jesus can be confirmed not only from the reference itself, but from the context that surrounds it. Muslims maintain that Jesus was not crucified and that those who thought they had killed him had mistakenly killed Judas Iscariot, Simon of Cyrene, or someone else in his place. They hold this belief based on various interpretations of Quran 4-157-158, which states, "They killed him not, nor crucified him, but so it was made to appear to them, or it appeared so unto them. Nay, Allah raised him up unto himself." Some early Christian Gnostic sects, believing Jesus did not have a physical substance, denied that he was crucified. In response, Ignatius of Antioch insisted that Jesus was truly born and was truly crucified, and wrote that those who held that Jesus only seemed to suffer only seemed to be Christians.